I know you've heard of vitamin D, but do you know the importance of vitamin D for the body and its many functions? Stay with your lady Salome in this video as I talk to Dr. Xochitl Cortez Gonzalez, who is originally from Mexico but is currently a clinical pharmacist and a functional medicine pharmacist who is licensed in California and Arizona, as we talk about the importance of this vital vitamin, vitamin D, and then the risk factors of having a deficiency. Stay tuned. Hello, viewers. This is Lady Salome here at Ezrawellness. Today, I'm very excited that I have another wonderful lady with me today. Her name is Dr. Xochitl Cortez Gonzalez. Dr. Xochitl is a clinical pharmacist. She has been in the pharmacy business for over 13 years with experience in clinical pharmacy, in acute care. She's also into research and more of cancer research, immunology, epigenetics for about 7 years right now. And she's also into alternative medicine. So she is like well-rounded pharmacist. She go with the mainstream and she do alternative as well. She's both satisfied in California and Arizona. She's well vested, and today I'm very glad to have her here at Ezrawellness to give us some tips on vitamins. So Dr. Xochitl, thank you so much for coming to Ezrawellness. You are very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All righty. Thank you so much for your time. I know you are a very busy woman. You don't have a lot of time, so I'll dive right in. Today, I was actually wanted us to talk about vitamin D and its benefit for the body, and more so how we could supplement and all that. But before we get into all that, I want to first to ask you, what are vitamins when we talk about? Because, you know, a lot of people are into vitamins, taking so many things. So if you will start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think nowadays vitamins is a hot topic. Everybody is, if they are into health and wellness, or they think they want to be healthy, they think, oh, I should start taking vitamins. But even the word vitamins, the root of the word, of the meaning, it has to be vital, like a vital molecule that our body needs. So in other words, it may be, if we're not a biochemist, it's just literally a protein or some part of our body, a molecule that our body absolutely needs to do any of the functioning that we come to just entail as our breathing, our thinking, our eyesight, our digestion. So any process in our body must have this vitamins or vitamin component, otherwise it will start failing or going into an imbalance. So vitamins in a nutshell is something that is vital for our body to exist and to stay in a good, what is called homeostasis or balance and optimal health.
Great, great, great. So now, because there is so many vitamins out there, I want us to talk about vitamin D, because I've heard that vitamin D is very vital to the whole human body. I take vitamin D supplement. So I just want you to talk about vitamin. What is vitamin D when we talk about vitamin D itself? Because there is so many vitamins, we can't talk about all of them, but I want us to talk about this particular one.
Sure. Well, vitamin D is one of my favorites. Vitamin D as in dog. It's another name for it is cholecalciferol. And it's actually one of the least the least expensive vitamins you will find on the shelf. What I will explain about in a nutshell, vitamin D, if you think of a vitamin D, just think of the sun. I call it the sunlight vitamin. So the sunlight vitamin, it's an extremely needed, vital vitamin in our bodies. It's a molecule that 90% gets produced by our own body through sunlight in our skin. So our skin metabolizes, imagine the UVB, that's exactly the ultraviolet B, is the actual ray that actually interacts chemically, like affects this chemically, some molecules in your skin, that actually dictates, not dictates, but part of those molecules that are involved in this UVB, it's your melanin and the skin tone of your skin. So the more that we're exposed to the sun, the more vitamin D we produce. And this vitamin D that we produce is about 90% of the total that we have. Now, there's a 10% that gets intaken by our food, but it all depends on your dietary lifestyle. Exactly. So fish has vitamin D, and nowadays, or many decades ago, the government has established these guidelines for milk to be fortified with vitamin D, and same thing with some cereals like kids cereals. But of course, nothing compares with actually getting exposed to the sun and getting that sunlight. Now, vitamin D is not just a vitamin. So it's, if you look it up, even if you do Wikipedia, you will find out that vitamin D is a hormone as well. So just like if you think of hormones, we'll just think about estrogen, progesterone, thyroid hormones. So you can relate them to how important in our body is. So vitamin D is one of those that have so many functions. Most of our cells in our body have some kind of receptor, actually it's called vitamin D receptor, for this vitamin. And there's, if we can compare all the different vitamins, there's some vitamins that are very specific to one function or one type of cell and what organ in your body. But vitamin D has this almost pluripotent, almost it can act in so many, almost in every single mechanism. It's still unknown all the different pathways or mechanisms that vitamin D is involved for keeping our health in check.
Alrighty. So now you talk about vitamin D as a hormone. So can you just talk about some of the importance of vitamin D? I know you mentioned the immune system. Is there any other way else that you could just go down the list? We need vitamin D for this and that and that. Can you just talk a little to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So vitamin D and hypertension, for instance, is one of the big ones. Unfortunately, the way that research is being done is almost like we look retrospectively. Okay, we have people that are sick with hypertension or any cardiovascular disease or heart failure. And then they look back and they say, okay, well, let me see what went wrong. What's the correlation? What do I find out that actually matches with this type of patients? And so they found out there's a high correlation with vitamin D deficiency and certain diseases. The main ones, the main ones are hypertension, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis. We also have some autoimmune diseases, high rate or constant infections, respiratory infections, and cancer is another big one. There's one that is very widely studied, and you can look it up, and it's colon cancer. And I think colon cancer has studied so much just because it's very easy to retrieve samples, because it's a very easy way to do research on patients that have colon cancer. It's harder to take biopsies from livers and pancreas even, right? So colon is very easy. You go in and you take some polyps and you scrape it and you bring it out, and you study them or what else is going on. But there's a high evidence that at least they don't know if it's the cause 100%. In other words, vitamin D deficient doesn't equal that you will have any of this disease, but they know that the correlation of or actually most of the people that end up with this disease, over 90%, do have a low vitamin D.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that answer your question, right?
Yes. So, oh wow. So that is, the vitamin D has a lot of relationship with a lot of disease as it stands. Okay.
Deficiency of vitamin D. Yes.
Yes. So now I want you to talk to you because you talk about the skin color. You talk about the vitamin D and the sun. So you're looking at somebody like me with a darker skin color, brown people, darker people, whatever we want to call ourselves. What I want to say, what is our relationship with vitamin D? Because I know living in the United States, probably all of us are deficient. We're always in the room and with a skin color and everything. So I want you to talk a little bit to that when it comes to skin color and vitamin D.
Absolutely. So I'm also Mexican descendant. So I have a nice little, brown color on my skin, and I can tan very well. Um, so what happens with vitamin D, as I explained, UVB lights, they need to react with our skin, right?
Mhm.
But there's also harmful UV light that can create, the famous melanoma, right? Or
Yeah,
cancer, or they
cancer.
can actually be very harsh on our immune system, very, very harsh on the skin even. So African people, and I'm just going to call African just because we were all coming from there anyway, but the ones that that keep the skin color, darker skin color, they adapted their skin color to a higher radiation of sunlight through the years of decades of thousands of years. So in other words, your body adapted to produce more melanin. So in the case of African or Black skin people or darker skin like mine, we do have enough melanin to buffer the harmful effect of the sun. But the darker your skin is, the longer or the duration of that buffering from that harmful rays will be. So in other words, you can stay in the sun. Let's say we compare both of us, right? You can stay in
Yeah.
the sun a lot longer than I can, because my skin eventually is going to be like, oh, I'm burning, I'm going to turn red, and I'm going to probably even blister. Um, your skin was designed to absorb a lot more sunlight because you evolved in primarily in this area by the equator.
Yeah.
This mass concentration of the sunlight.
Yeah.
Okay. And even the way of living, eventually we all come from exactly the same thing, but we have developed this different skin tones that we adapted through the years as we lived north or far away from the equator. So there's not much sun, so we don't need that much protection anymore as far as the harmful sunlight. So when now that we talk about vitamin D,
Yeah.
as I said, 90% of our vitamin D comes from the sun exposure and the chemical reaction that happens in our skin up in sun exposure, and that makes our vitamin D. And very little comes from dietary, but as you said, we stay indoors, and it's just everybody. And now, because of migration, now you even have, people are living all over the place. So I can assure you that anybody north of the United States, it's deficient just because you don't get enough sun exposure just by being away from the equator and or North America. That's what I try to say. But also the other fact is that we're indoors, we have a lot of covering, in
Yeah.
our skin. We always wearing all this clothing. And now and I don't want to get too political on the overuse of sunscreen. People are abusing the sunscreen even when they're exposing themselves for almost 10 minutes to the sun or 1 hour. And I think we go into the recommendations of what I think will be the ideal. But I think that there's a lot of this misconception of I feel like they have made the sun as the guilty entity for skin cancer, which I think, of course, we need to be careful. Everything's in moderation, but I feel like that has been putting a lot more other people into a deficiency, in this case for vitamin D.
Okay.
And yeah, go ahead.
So what I would say is that, will it be safe to say that at least people of color living in the North America, Canada, Europe, especially those of us who live in the cold climate areas, would it be safe to say that most of us are really lacking in vitamin D?
Yes, I would say so. And I, myself, you know, I live in Arizona and I still, you know, supplement with vitamin D. I encourage everybody that is listening to, when they go to their primary care physician, to ask for vitamin D testing. I actually know that there's a recent paper, a publication 2017, in which they actually found some evidence that African American people have what they call vitamin D binding proteins. So imagine that you have like a reservoir of vitamin D, and so your levels in vitamin D in the blood. Okay, well, let's first start with the testing of vitamin D is done on the blood. So you get a blood sample, and it's called 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 test. That's the test, and it ranges the testing. Well, based on the values, most of the labs they put it from 30 to 50 is the optimal range. I will recommend my own, or what I research as the best, you know, ranges
Range.
or levels that you should be. But this 2017 publication challenges a little bit this testing and the blood levels, because when you test the blood levels, you test the amount of vitamin D that is literally flowing in the blood, you know, it's
That's it.
free, you know, just liquid in the blood, right? But it doesn't tell you about whether if you have a reservoir, like a little tank of
Yeah.
vitamin D. And it seems like they did this comparison with African American women. I think it was all women, and European women, just to give an example, because I don't recall exactly, but the point is, they found out that African American people, the vitamin D in their serum level does not 100% reflect of what they actually have. And I cannot tell you exactly. I just know that they found a higher expression of this vitamin D binding protein. So it's quenched and it doesn't get captured by this test. It doesn't mean that if you're, let's say if the range is 30 to 50 and you test your blood and you're in a 9 or a 10, you know, way below the 30, which is the minimum, okay? I think for sure you should,
Get
you
some
know,
vitamin D.
get some vitamin D, absolutely. And I think that answers your question, because
Yeah.
I want to go into the you know, the other stuff that we mentioned that we wanted to talk about.
Okay. So definitely, you would say before we start supplementation, you talking about testing. But I know, you know, testing, sometimes it's hard to get tested. Some people don't have insurance and stuff. Is there any way that somebody could get overdose of vitamin D? Have you heard of that before?
Well, I haven't seen it clinically. Like I haven't seen someone that walks in and says, oh, he has 100 and something of vitamin D and he actually has hypercalcemia or something. So the risk of high doses of vitamin D is that you have too much calcium, because vitamin D is linked to metabolism, or calcium metabolism. And that would be the worst case scenario. But in order to do that, I believe you need to take like exorbitant amounts of vitamin D, which I don't think is not something, unless people take it by mistake, those monthly doses that we can talk about later about dosing. If they take it daily instead of every month, I think maybe they will see something like that, but it's very, very rare that you'll see an overreaction. Now, I would prefer for someone to be supplementing that not, and more of it to be something sustained, like a lifestyle, you know, you keep doing the supplementation. Or we can go into that when we talk about the, I mean, we can even talk about some of the COVID. There's some research or trials that has been done with vitamin D, not as an intervention, but as a correlation of the poor outcome of patients that had COVID and very
No
deficient of
vitamin D.
D. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Wow, that's amazing. So that means if somebody doesn't get tested and they start taking vitamin D, it could be safe because of where we live.
Yes, it could be safe, but of course, I'm not a medical doctor.
That's it, definitely.
Well, we're not, so we disclaim that you should eventually, or
Get
you should
tested.
talk to your doctor about any supplementation, anything that you do. And if you go to LabCorp or some of those labs, I'm pretty sure even without insurance, it's not that expensive. You can shop around. I think it's worth knowing where you're at. If
Mhm.
more, because if you're below 30 or below 20, I mean, you need to start doing it like right away.
Maybe more.
And more, exactly, more every day. And we go into the dosages, what as a pharmacist I recommend. And I actually recommend it by the time that all this COVID started for our patients when they come into the hospital. Yeah.
Okay. So now we know that because of our skin color. So now you say we go testing. Somebody get tested and they say, oh, I don't want to take vitamin D, but I want to get it from the sun. How much sun do you get to
Yeah,
get vitamin D versus you taking the supplement, So if you
absolutely.
can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, this is a great topic. I mean, because a lot of people think that just taking supplements is like substituting a healthy diet or a healthy lifestyle, right?
Mhm.
And it's not. It is, it helps, but it's not it. And I'm going to tell you why. And vitamin D is one of those that I love to talk about because you need to think that the sun is triggering your body to produce this vitamin D, right? But imagine that the sun has this three different rays that goes into your skin. And one of the rays produces vitamin D. But the other two, what do you think they do? Or what do you, I mean, that's in the skin, right? It's so important. They actually create vitamin D. But if you have the exposure in your eyes, if you have the exposure in your, I don't know, mucus when you, I don't know, go like this or whatever. But point is, there's different ways of getting the benefits of the sun. That is just one of the outcomes of the sun exposure is called vitamin D. There is some research that indicates that the sun light is so vital to our health, to our optimal health. Not just vitamin D is only one of the measurable, like we can measure how much sun, let's say, we get, or one of the consequences of getting sunlight in our bodies. But there's plenty of research that has evidence about our eyesight and macular degeneration, like some of the diseases. They say, okay, let me extrapolate, let me actually go back retrospectively, and patients that have macular degeneration, which is uh, literally when people start decaying on their eyesight because of age, or they actually start going into almost blindness, there's a big correlation with screen usage, like the computer. The more hours you put in your computer using it, but there's actually some research in which they notice that people that actually get more exposure to the sun, and I'm not saying you're sun gazing. I don't want you to burn your eyes and look into the sun,
Okay.
but but we overuse the sunglasses as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's not even 6 a.m, the sun is rising and you look super stylish with your sunglasses. I'm like, where are you going? you know so to answer your question on how much, or the importance of sunlight versus supplementation, and let's say that I don't want to take supplementation, I want to just do sun. What I would do, or what I recommend doing, is you expose yourself right in the middle of the day when they normally tell you in the news not to do it because you're gonna get skin cancer. And I can assure you that if you have a good lifestyle, and you take good care of your diet, of your workout, your exercise, your health, and your mind, your emotions, if you go to the sun for 15 minutes and the peak time where the sun is the highest, 15 minutes, try to expose yourself. A lot of the times, what I tell people when they work in the office, just roll up your sleeves as much as you can, and literally expose your the thinner
The
part of your
inner part.
skin, the one that's lighter, and literally where your veins are, right here. It's almost like you get a direct exposure also into your blood, right? And just go like this and stay for a little bit. I'm not saying you go and gaze at the sun, because of course, it's going to hurt your eyes, but try to just, if even if you go outside and you do workout, use a hat, because it's always good to cover your self-esteem. Otherwise, the crinkles and everything else comes out. But use a hat, but don't overdo the glasses and everything, unless you're playing a sport that you need to, look at the sun or look, gaze around it. But I normally recommend people to go in the sun in the peak times, like from 10 till between 10 to 2 or 3 p.m. Get some exposure in the areas where you normally don't get exposed. And moreover, when you start feeling like you're going to get sick, like people, start feeling like the headache, or start feeling like, oh, I'm down. I think, I'm coming up, something's coming up. Let's say that you're in the cold winter, time. There's always one window that has some sunlight, hopefully in your house, and literally just sit yourself there and try to get as much sun as you can, for maybe an hour, since you're indoors, so it's not like the whole sun is on you. And also, it's sunlight, and not to say vitamin D as well, but sunlight is correlated with mood, like, so you have greater, nicer, mood, and your emotions are a little more balanced. And of course, it has to do with vitamin D as well. If you also look into psychiatric diseases, you will find out that when vitamin D is lacking, you probably are more
susceptible to those diseases.
Exactly. And infectious disease, I mean, we'll talk about that as well. But I would say, I think I answered your question about how much exposure to the sun. 10, 15 minutes, direct sunlight, and parts of your body, or even your belly sometimes, so you have that option. Parts of your body that are normally not as exposed or not as tan. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So my other question is, when it comes to sunlight, we're still on the sunlight. Somebody in Africa, where we have a lot of sunlight, and they are outside in the sun all the time, that maybe, hopefully that time, the people there with a skin color and everything will have enough vitamin D, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, and actually there's a meta-analysis just came out, because when Salome invited me to give this talk, I actually Googled what is the most recent data, and they did a meta-analysis or a systemic review on African people, just in Africa, just the continent of Africa. I didn't say African Americans, African people in the continent of Africa. And they actually found out that there's the more north or the more south of the equator, you find more deficiency, and there's more deficiency in African people that live in cities versus rural areas, and the way that they have lifestyle. So for instance, in the south, let's say, or people that, even if they're around the equator, but they have the hunting lifestyle, that they are out and about, with very little clothing, those didn't have any issues with their vitamin D. Their vitamin D was off the roof. Okay. And they also noticed, unfortunately, that newborns were deficient, but that's something that it's almost the same anywhere else in the world. Vitamin D and women that are pregnant tend to be low, and then the baby is born, and unfortunately the baby has not much vitamin D.
So then, that do answer the question. So that means, even if you are someone living in Africa where there is a lot of sun, and you work in the office and you're not exposed to most sun, you could be deficient in vitamin D. So don't say, because I live in Africa, there is so much sun. Depending on your lifestyle, you could still be deficient, correct?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I just, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's the same as, how much clothes you have, how much you stay indoors versus outdoors. And of course, the diet may be a little different, because, I think that maybe there's some areas that eat more fish than others, but it will be the same, average as any other part of the world where there's coast and people eat fish versus not. So it's more like, it's a skin exposure, or the sourcing of vitamin D will be from the sun. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you're listening to us and you're still in Africa, you're thinking, I have a lot of sun, depending on how you're living there, you could still be deficient in vitamin D. So it will be a good thing to get it tested. So now I want us to go to the supplementation of vitamin D. Now that we talk about the sunlight, so now we know we have to get a lot of sun. And here we are always cold. We are in jackets. I mean, the East Coast, which is freezing. Right now we have so much snow outside. So you know when I'm going outside, I have my jacket head to toe. I try to at least expose my head a little bit to get some sun into my eyes. But I want us to talk about supplementation. If somebody is here and they want to look at supplemented vitamin D, since it's so vital for pretty much all body functions, the way that you said it, how much of vitamin D can someone take? I know everybody listening to us would have to talk to their doctor first before starting any supplementation, but what would you say?
Sure. So first of all, I would get tested if I can. If you cannot get tested, um, I would say 1,000 to 2,000 units a day will be sufficient. If you have a high predisposition or you already have osteoporosis, cardiac disease, cancer, or even already have family members that have cancer, I would, or hypertension yourself, or even family history, I would definitely, if you have never taken supplementation, I will start at least with 2,000 to 2,500 or 5,000 if you already have symptoms of any of the diseases I just explained. I'm just going to give you an example. All our COVID patients, when we first started getting in my hospital, I was invited to help design what protocol, what is it that we're going to give them. And as you know, COVID, as they develop COVID, is there's not much we can do, and allopathic medicine is there for support, give them oxygen and maybe give some steroids inhaled and some other inhalers to open up the lungs. There's a couple other medications that have come up, but they were very experimental at the beginning. And I remember the first thing that came to my mind, I say vitamin D. And the supplementation that we normally do for vitamin D in the hospital, because we almost 100% of the time, if we test them, they will be extremely deficient if they're that sick. And we give 5,000 units a day. There's other ways of supplementing. Maybe your doctor, if you have osteoporosis or you have cardiovascular disease, there's another fashion of supplementing vitamin D, which is 50,000 a month. I am particularly against that type of dosage, and that's based on evidence. There's some research in which they compared the outcome or, diseases that someone supplementing with like 50,000 this once a month or twice a week regimen versus daily. And the ones that triumph, or the ones that actually did better or had not much disease, were the ones that were doing daily. Okay. Daily 1,000, 2,000 units. There's, of course, other guidelines, they only tell you to do 400 units or 200 units. I think that needs to eventually change. It's a little outdated, just because 400 units is what you get in your multivitamins, and I can assure you that's not enough. Yeah. So when people say, oh, I'm taking a multivitamin, I don't need to take any extra vitamin D. Well, I invite you to look, turn around the bottle and look at the small letters and see how much of that vitamin D it contains in that bottle, because very likely it's not enough. And if you want to really prove it to yourself, just take a test and then see the numbers go up and try to manage it. The ranges of vitamin D in the blood, or at least this 25 hydroxyl vitamin D3 test, is 30 to 50. But for someone that has cardiovascular disease, they want you to have an optimal vitamin D over 70. If you have osteoporosis, they want you to be over 50. If you just want to be an okay person young, well, they must allopathic medicine say, oh, it's okay if you're between 30 and 50. But my suggestion is that you always want to strive for over 50. Now, I don't know how it's going to change with this 2017 evidence, and maybe there's more groups coming out with more research about this vitamin D binding protein for African people. That means that you have a reservoir of that vitamin D, and the levels may be different for people that are Black. And that will be something that we don't know yet, but I wouldn't, and the reason why I'm giving you the most updated information is because I don't want to, I want it to be to the best of my knowledge versus, oh, I'm giving you outdated information. So I would suggest for African people to have it at least above or by 50, or no low 30s, no below 30 for sure. Even I would say also for Mexican or Latino, dark, any dark skin person, the correlations are very clear. Even right now with COVID, I believe you have, if your vitamin D is low or deficient, you have 16 or 14% more chances of you getting very sick in a ventilator. And I think even six more times getting dying if your vitamin
Wow,
D,
if you have low vitamin D levels.
if you have vitamin, yeah, exactly. That's a correlation retrospectively. And it doesn't mean, this is based on your previous vitamin D. They don't care. Even if, for instance, my inpatients, people are coming to a hospital, I give them vitamin D. Well, that may help a little bit, but it's not going to make a big difference, is what it looks like in the research that I'm just sharing right now. It's about how much you took care of yourself before, and supplemented, longitudinal versus out of the sun. No, I'm feeling sick now, I'm going to take it.
Okay, that is very important because, Dr. Zotil, here at Ezra Wellness, we promote that people eat healthy. We want people to prevent disease instead of getting it and treating it. So that is so ideal that you're talking to us about vitamin D. So now you talk about the fact that from everything that you're saying, it's not likely that somebody could overdose on vitamin D, but you will recommend that we get tested for it to make sure that whatever supplementation we're doing at least is working and our levels are going up or things like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's nice to see that trend. And moreover, if it's very low, I will really put I will be 5,000, or go to your doctor and make sure the supplementation is correct, the dosage is correct. But I will do at least 5,000 a day if my levels are very low, and try to bring them up as soon as possible. And more, I mean, I explain about COVID, but it's any infectious disease or
Yeah.
viral disease. It can prevent you from having, I mean, right now is SARS-CoV-2 virus, but tomorrow maybe another virus, or the flu, whatever it is. And it just tells you, as you just said, this it's a lifestyle. If you keep it up, you probably won't have to
Worry about it.
Exactly. You won't see the effects of a virus pandemic, affecting your life, except for the social part, right? I mean, knock on wood, I haven't got any of COVID, and I work in a hospital. I've been working since it started and before it started, and I've been in close proximity with loved ones that have had COVID, and I never experienced, and I'm not going to talk about the asymptomatic or whatever it is, but I feel like if you fill the tank of all this essential molecules or vitamins, and the best way is sourcing it from the source, eating it from the source. In this case, vitamin D, besides fish and organ meat also has some vitamin D. The sun is so important. And that will be very holistic way of getting.
That's it. I'm getting it. So, Dr. Zochi, what I want to say is that when it comes to the supplementation, right now we go to the store, there is so many vitamin D. Would you say that any of them that we get is pretty much okay? Is it vitamin D3, vitamin D2? Which of it specifically do we have to purchase if we go? Hopefully our doctors will direct us, but let's say we haven't spoken to them yet and then we want to get it.
Of course. Okay, so normally cholecalciferol vitamin D3 is the one that you want to get. It's the same form that is the one produced by our skin.
Okay.
And you can take it, and it's super cheap. There's other kinds, and one is used particularly when patients have issues with their kidneys, like either they have dialysis, and most of their nephrologists or the doctors that specialize in kidney, they
Yeah.
will give them this a special vitamin D, and that is called calcitriol or calcitriol, depending on how you pronounce it. Because this cholecalciferol, vitamin D3, uh, once it's produced, or once, let's say, we take it in our food, it goes into our blood, and then it metabolizes in the liver, and let's say another molecule that looks like just like vitamin D3, and then it metabolizes further in the kidney to make the very active form, which is the one that goes into your nucleus of the cell and does all the magic that vitamin D does.
Okay.
So in other words, it needs to metabolize in the kidney all the way to the end. And if your kidney is not working okay, then we'll need to use that active form, which is calcitriol, which is a completely different dosage. And I recommend, even if it sounds like, oh, I'd rather, why is it that I don't use the active form versus cholecalciferol? I wouldn't go into using the active form, which is calcitriol, that is also, is not, I think it's prescription only anyway. And I would just stick with cholecalciferol. Vitamin D3 is cheap. And now it's actually known recently, and based on my knowledge in some papers, they published that not only the kidney can make it into an active form of vitamin D, but also immune cells. And isn't that like another message from the sky that says our immune system works on vitamin D? So there you go. Yeah.
Definitely. So with the vitamin D, and then our immune system is so vital. We need to get the vitamin D. Yeah.
Yep.
And then the last question that I want to ask is, what about the vitamin D and K2? Because you hear people saying you have to take it together. So I just want you to talk a little bit about that as we bring our conversation to a close.
Yeah, very good. Very good you point that out, because it's one of the main things that I recommend. So you don't want to take vitamin D without a proper K2 intake. Where do vitamin K2, maybe someone hopefully hopefully, if someone's listening here and they are taking warfarin or coumadin, which is a blood thinner, and they're afraid of all this vitamin supplementation, vitamin K is the antidote for warfarin. And vitamin K, that is K1, it's involved in coagulation, okay? Like blood coagulation, like in other words, blood clotting, correct. Yeah, so vitamin K2 is kind of like a cousin of it, but it's not directly involved with blood clotting. Okay. Vitamin K2 is very important for the uptake of not only the usage of vitamin D, but also the uptake of calcium. So anybody that has osteoporosis and they're taking, because very well done, or their doctors are asking them, oh, you should supplement with vitamin D. Well, I don't know if your doctor may or may not know, and you can look it up. Just, Google it and start looking at stuff that is out there. Vitamin K2 is very important for the absorption of the calcium into the bones, and the vitamin D. So it's almost like they go hand in hand. And this is something that it was not very well studied, but now it is. So vitamin K2, it can be synthesized. The natural way to, of course, you can supplement it just like you do vitamin D, but you can also get it from sources in our food.
Okay.
And the food sources are pretty much anything that has gone through fermentation. And I asked actually one of our common friends that is Ghanaian, and I asked her, well, did you eat anything fermented, like in your country?
What did she say?
And she said that you have some kind of corn fermented drink or something. And right. And I said, well, that's it. I mean, nature, it's funny how all our ancestors knew, they had all the blockages.
They did, definitely.
And now we become industrialized, right? And we come into this McDonald's and practical fast food, and we forget all the foods that raised us and made all our ancestors survive all this, all those years, So anyway, in my case, for Mexicans, we do have a couple of things that are fermented, not at all, not a lot, but we do. So I recommend people cooking with fermented or eating fermented food. And if that's not something that they like or it's part of your diet, then I will look for a supplementation. Nowadays, there is vitamin D3 with vitamin K2 together. You just need to look it up. I can recommend it. I have a website, and probably Salma, I don't know if you do manage like a website that we can
Yeah, I
recommend.
would.
Very good. And then also the other key factor for vitamin D and K2, now that we're talking about it, will be magnesium as well. Most people are deficient on magnesium because we don't have enough intake of leafy greens, and then our soil and agriculture is depleted. So the amount of magnesium and good healthy minerals in our soil are very low, and that means that translates into very deficient vegetables,
Yeah.
and that translates into very deficient humans that eat the vegetables. If we even get to eat the vegetables, right? Because a lot of us don't eat a lot of the vegetables.
No.
So anyway, I would say over 80% of our population worldwide are deficient also in magnesium. That would be another good
Oh
topic.
boy, that would be another good topic to talk about.
Because magnesium has to do with cardiovascular
Yes,
disease,
yes, yes,
all this
yes.
other stuff. So yeah.
Okay. So you're talking about fermented food. You're talking about something like sauerkraut. So thank you so much, Dr. Zochil. Before we go, do you have any last words for our viewers? So when we are looking for you, where would we find you? If somebody want to go on your website and stuff, and I'm going to post the information down so that people who want to follow you and get supplementation ideas.
Sure. So I do have a website. It's called Your Holistic Advocate. Your Holistic Advocate, just all together, .com. And I'm very passionate about educating and or just giving that little seed in the minds of people that are ready to see that change, and that change of not being dependent on a doctor or just a catastrophe, a medical catastrophe happening to you. More
That's
like take control of your health, take control of what you can do, because all you can do right now is what is going to be impacting your future,
definitely.
and if you focus on prevention, I can guarantee that the chances of you having issues down the line, it will be lower. Plus, you'll be more well-grounded in what you could do to offset that disease in a more healthy way, versus just being, oh my God, I've been diagnosed with this, and now you don't know what to do. And
That's
also,
it.
this is a step at a time type of work with lifestyle changes and supplementation. You won't expect that if you have 4 or 5 decades of poor lifestyle, that if you do 3 months, 4 months, or maybe a year of excellent care of yourself and doing all this now measures, preventative and supplementation, that you will see an immediate change or something drastic. A lot of times you do, as you start seeing more energy, but I would invite you not to be discouraged and be patient. The same way you got to where you're at and took you decades to get there. Well, be patient. All this is discipline. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of living, and you will find yourself happier, more joyful, and which are the consequences of taking care of yourself. And if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of anybody else, including your job, your kids, your spouse, your parents. Because and I don't want to get religious, but you need to start loving yourself so you can love others.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. Zotil, for your time. Thank you for coming to Ezrawellness. I know we look forward to having you for more exciting topics. Very, very insightful. Thank you so much. Viewers, now you heard it. If you're not taking vitamin D for anything because of COVID, you want to take it. And you want to supplement before you get sick. Don't wait until you get sick before you look into that supplementation. And thank you for watching this video. Until I see you in the next video, remember, this is Ezrawellness, where you learn proven ways to healthy living. Thank you for your time.